Hey everyone, this is Zero X Nguyen from RUNEBase.org, and you're listening to the RUNEBase podcast. Here on the RUNEBase podcast, we interview founders, we interview developers in the THORChain ecosystem, and we also give news, guides, and updates on THORChain and decentralized finance at large. In the previous podcast, we went over the recent exploits and attacks that happened to the THORChain protocol over the course of July. And in this show, Tratium, Chris from GrassRoots, and I hop back on to discuss all the good things that have happened as a result. All of the initiatives, the community response, the programs that are being put in place in order to make sure that this community and this protocol comes out of these attacks stronger than before. And the response truly has been incredible. We go through a lot of the official THORChain documentation in terms of the 5-prong recovery plan, some of the things that need to be considered and the consequences that need to be understood and worked through before turning the network back online. And then what the process of actually turning this network back online looks like. And then we close out by just jamming and riffing on what this means for the community, how this is actually a good, positive thing, and how the community has responded both in sentiment and in ethos, and then also just in how the Rune token has performed over the past few days, which has been impressive. It was really great to come together on this show and just get this really renewed sense of optimism and excitement and positive momentum and positive energy back. So I hope you enjoy the show. And if you do, feel free to drop us a like and subscribe on YouTube or on your podcast player of choice. As always, like a comment or a review on iTunes helps out a lot. So if you feel so inclined, drop us a review there and we'll see you on the inside. Thank you so much. Peace. Awesome. So we are back for part 2 of the THORChain exploit attack podcast series here on RUNEBase.org. To kick us off, last episode, we got a chance to meet Tratium and Chris, but real quick, Chris, do you want to give a quick introduction about yourself?
I'm Chris. I do GrassRoots Crypto, make the videos, been full-time in crypto for the start of the year, just making videos after I was finding my passion last year. Big step. I've learnt a lot over the last, let's say, 12 months per se. So a lot of it's just been through dedicated learning. And I like to teach it, I like to give the information so people could keep up to date and decode some of that technical stuff into something that people can meaningfully understand, because not everybody has all those technical abilities. So that's me in a nutshell.
Appreciate your work, and it's been an inspiration for me personally and for, I'm sure, most of the community here. So thank you, Chris. Next, Tratium, you want to give yourself a quick intro?
Yeah, hi, I'm Tratium. I run THORChain.help, THORChain.com, and am the editor at RUNEBase. And just like Chris, I've kind of dedicated my past year in crypto to creating accessible, easy to understand resources for the THORChain community to, simplify some of the complexities that are part of the network and reword them into simplified ways that the layman can understand.
Love it. And I appreciate your work as well. And, the two of you are probably two of the leaders, if you will, in educating the community here. And on this particular topic, there's no digression from that. The two of you have put out some great content on recent events in the THORChain ecosystem. So at grassrootscrypto.io, if you search Grassroots Crypto on YouTube, or if you go to runebase.org and check out the news section, a lot of that is work Tratium either wrote or edited. And as well, for today's episode, we pulled on sources from THORChain official channels like THORChain's Medium. THORChain has shared in Notion some documentation on timeline and some of the projects that are in progress. And then also some official references from like Halborn's like project management tools, where they share their milestone and their Kanban board, talking about where we are with progress on like audits and things like that. So for today's show, we'll go over the 5-prong recovery plan that THORChain has outlined, and then some considerations that the network has to take and the community has to take into effect as we get back online, and then what getting back online actually looks like when all is ready. So to start, let's jump in with the 5-prong recovery plan. Tratium, do you want to give a real quick high-level overview on the 5 bullet points, and then we can jump in one at a time?
So the 5 points of this recovery plan are auditing, a bounty program, an ongoing red team, active security monitoring, and protocol level insurance.
Awesome. And then I guess we could just go through each of these one by one and then just add a bit of color. So for the ongoing audits, Trail of Bits and Halborn, Tratium, you want to start by giving a overview of that, and then Chris, you and I can add some color to it.
Yeah, so Trail of Bits and Halborn are going to be doing audits over the next 4 to 6 weeks, possibly extending until the end of August or September. And Halborn is a very well-respected audit firm, and they have a dashboard online that anyone can view that shows their progress of these audits. And so they're going to start with things like auditing the ERC20 router and the parts that it touches on in the Ethereum deployment on THORChain, and audit the Bifrost component to make sure that's secure. And they're going to be more in depth with various other components of the THORChain network. I think currently they're standing up their own node so that they can do more in-depth testing. And that's going to be a very, very comprehensive audit. The community and the team will be much more confident in the security of the network once those wrap up.
Yeah, I think one of the interesting things about how THORChain is communicating this too is that you can see we'll share the Notion documentation, but you can see like the timeline. And then while these audits are happening, the THORChain development team will be going through and making the adjustments and modifications to the protocol in preparation for getting the chain back online, and then eventually the different integrations back online on an individual basis as well. And Chris, you've outlined here some of the particular details of what Halborn has been looking at and what areas of coverage include. Do you want to go in depth into some of these points?
Yeah, I just looked at the last update. So as Tratium already said, look at the Bifrost, and that's obviously how THORChain connects to external chains. Does that kind of translation between chains specific to what THORChain knows. That's the SDK. So like the Cosmos SDK, so static review, functional and dynamic review. The router, which I said before, that's on the Ethereum side. And then there's certain sort of internal components and chain connectors that THORChain use that'll also be looked at. So that's not just to do with Ethereum, but that's to do with like BTC, LTC, BCH, stuff like that. Yeah, I understand they're going to set up their own test node, and that's going to be looking for exploits as well. And then that will roll into things like the cluster launcher and the node launcher. So the cluster launcher is when you deploy your node into some infrastructure like AWS or bare metal or whatever else. And then the node launcher is what's actually deploying the Kubernetes cluster into that. So that's actual sort of all the code and all the deployment, all the software that gets deployed to run the node. So then they're looking to see, well, where are the keys stored? How can you get into that node? Can you penetrate that node? And whilst testing was done for single chain chaosnet, there was penetration testing already done previous. This will be an update to that. And then obviously the vault setup and management, that's to do with the key store, the key management and operations there for the keys, and then the implementation for TSS or threshold signature scheme that THORChain has. So we're going to be looking at all those components. Also know that a code walkthrough was done. That's been shared. Well, the code walkthrough was done by the team, being shared to the auditors to really help bootstrap that process. And has also been given to other, say code security white hat members as well. So there's really, really a lot of information out there for the auditors to go on, as well as the previous audits done. So that should be quite good and quite comprehensive.
Yeah. And we'll talk a bit about, so we have two external security firms doing very structured, organized audits of the system. And this is going to be different from the ongoing security and penetration testing that Halborn will do, which we'll talk about in the later section here. And so these audits will lead way to, or actually, at the same time of these audits, going into the second section here, there are going to be bounty programs, one already running, and then a couple that will be ongoing as well. So, Tratium, do you want to give an overview of what we're looking at in terms of some of the bounty programs that are being put into effect now?
Yeah, absolutely. So Immunify is the major one that is now up and running. There is an active bounty project on Immunify for developers to take advantage of, or for hackers to take advantage of.
Actually, what is a bounty program for anybody that might not know?
Yeah, sure. So, when you hack something, especially in crypto, there is a, financial incentive to do that. If you can steal funds and make money, then that's your reward. You make money by stealing from the network. But a bounty program is a way to take those black hat hackers and incentivize them to do it in a legal way that doesn't damage the reputation of the protocol and doesn't steal funds from actual users, by turning them into white hats by offering a bounty, essentially a payment commensurate with the value that the exploit that you find could be worth. So if
it's like crowdsourcing, like the penetration test. Yeah. Yeah.
It's like crowdsourcing hackers into penetration testing your network, so they can find exploits and be rewarded for them in a way that is, there's kind of like a mediator in between, and that's the purpose of Immunefi, is to be that middleman that lists the rules of engagement for finding bounties. If you find one, you disclose it to Immunefi. They mediate that with the team. Team says, yeah, that's a real one. Immunefi, handles kind of like the payout and stuff. And with Immunefi, this program that's live right now with THORChain, I believe the maximum payout for a single bounty for like the highest level exploit is $500,000, 500,000, which is, a pretty big reward for anybody, with a maximum like kind of lifetime payout right now of 2 million. And once that, 2 million limit, if and when that is reached, given enough bugs have been found, I think the team has mentioned that they can, revisit that, increase that later on if needed. But already a P1 vulnerability was disclosed through Immunefi of a possible infinite mint of Rune, and it was properly disclosed and is being patched. So it's already working.
It's pretty crazy too, if you think about it.
Yeah.
But yeah, and it occurred to me when I was doing the research for this episode that there's a few different bounty programs that are going to kind of layer into this initiative. And so the first is what we're going through right now, which is that you mentioned, like a $500,000 bounty for critical P1 bugs. And the idea here is to, as the team defines it, incentivize white hat activity and responsible disclosures, mitigate protocol and reputational risk, and ensure simple and effective processes exist for responsible disclosures. What will happen next is, as these audits and bounties kind of surface potential issues, the team will go through what they call the ongoing audit remediation, which is like as these issues are disclosed or come up, the team will address them, and then eventually get THORChain back online, and get the chains running again and get swaps and everything back online. And as that happens, they'll bring back each chain online one at a time, starting with Binance Chain. And we'll talk about more about this rollout later, but they'll start with Binance Chain, then UTXO chains through September, Ethereum towards the beginning of October, possibly ERC20s after that. And there will be a bounty period for a chain-specific bounty period for a period of about a week and a half to 2 weeks, during which they will point the bounty program at that specific integration point, and then have a remediation period throughout that before getting that chain back online. So that's the second part, is this kind of layering, like kind of pointed specific, chain specific bounty programs before turning on each chain. And then the last aspect here that we have to look forward to will be an ongoing bounty program with Immunefi, to surface, any other bugs, what they call BAU, business as usual, when the protocol is online. And one more thing to add to that, we are in talks with Immunefi, and we'll be interviewing the CEO of Immunefi on Friday this week. And that podcast will likely go live here in the mid-August, depending on when you're listening. So Tratium, do you want to give an overview of the ongoing Red Team, part 3 here?
Sure. Details are pretty light on the Red Team itself, but from what I understand, there is currently a Red Team in place from 9 Realms, using, I believe, their in-house engineers to kind of actively kind of try to penetration test the network. And what a Red Team is this kind of active, offensive, kind of internal white hat hacking group that attempts to pretend to be, external malicious hackers, and attack the network to try to do what they do, fight fire with fire, and find vulnerabilities within the network. And so this first ongoing Red Team is kind of an in-house one by the 9 Realms folks, or at least the 9 Realms folks are kind of coordinating it. It's going to be like a 24/7 like DevOps team monitoring, each new PR that gets introduced, monitoring the network, checking for vulnerabilities, making sure it all looks good. And then I believe in the future, I'm not sure if this proposal has been completely ironed out and signed off on, but Halborn has proposed their own Red Team to do the same sort of deal on their side. So an external red team that will continuously monitor the network, code review, and just use their expertise to find vulnerabilities before the actual hackers do. And this would all take place mostly on the live network.
So let's just say I'm looking at Twitter. It looks like Nine Realms has got it to do the red team, and they're going to be called THORSEC.
THORSEC?
Yeah. It's just
was this just posted now?
Yeah, like now. THORSEC, SEC.
Very nice.
Cool.
And what are any other details included with that?
So you're going to have a look. THORSEC, they're going to be 24/7 team trying to break THORChain. And obviously monitor and break THORChain.
Nice.
So going through, THORSEC will review existing code, new PRs, and participate in critical no-go decisions for the network, stuff like that. So looks like Nine Realms has got it. We'll be always on red team, consistently trying to break THORChain's defenses from within and acting as a first response triage for bounties.
Yeah, I love that. And I got to point out that if you look at the THORChain work in progress notion, where they lay out each focus area, its priorities, objectives, outcomes, key people, Nine Realms appears in almost every under every focus area, under key people for almost every focus area. So we really got to give a lot of credit and a big shout out to Nine Realms for really stepping up here in a big way and driving forward a lot of these initiatives that are going towards strengthening the protocol. One of those initiatives related here to this ongoing red team. So Nine Realms, I guess through THORSEC, thank you for that alpha leak, Chris. We're chilling in real time here. But another initiative that I know of that is related to this ongoing red team initiative is this Guardians of THORChain Swarm. And this is something that I had a nice kind of front row seat to. There's a group of us that are in this Telegram group where it's the founders and developers of THORChain ecosystem projects. And in this group, in the wake of the exploits, the developers and the founders in this ecosystem, led largely by Gavin, from Nine Realms, kind of came together and had this idea of doing a kind of like a more public Guardians of THORChain, as they're calling it. And so this will be kind of, it's different than internal structured auditors. It's different than completely independent white hats that are, looking for exploits and reporting them responsibly through the bounty program. And really, this is going to be a community of security experts and white hats and auditors who are working kind of in a loosely knit swarm. And they were given a code walkthrough and introduced to the code base, and then were just kind of directed loosely towards in a less controlled, more chaotic way, like kind of do your thing, try and find more vulnerabilities. And so it sits kind of in between what would be like an internal structured audit or red team versus like this like open bounty program. You have this Guardians of THORChain Swarm program. So it's a cool kind of spread that you can kind of see emerging here, and which all sorts of different the protocol is being hardened and strengthened from many different angles here, and it's been a fantastic, a beautiful thing to see really on this decentralized effort. Tratium, Chris, do you guys have anything else to add on the ongoing red team initiative?
No, I don't think so. That covers it all.
Yes, it's really good to get that code walkthrough out there, because then it's a two-pronged approach for security. You've got the structured auditors by those companies, and then you have the unstructured ones where you've got just white hat hackers, grey hat hackers looking at this and then trying to find exploits in an unstructured way. So that's two different and independent approaches, and then by giving that walkthrough that's on video now, I think this just really helps bootstrap and enables anybody to understand the code base, because THORChain is really hard to understand and kind of like a big barrier to entry, I think. So I think that really makes it helpful, and then it's going to be really interesting to see how that pans out. You already see like all these new issues on GitHub, so it's good to see. Yeah.
Have you been poking around there, Chris? Like, did you watch the video or take part in that community call?
No, I watched the video. I edited the video. It's a pretty good video. And just been keeping an eye on on the issues. You can see lots of new proposals and say, oh, this is a problem, or we should do something better this way and stuff like that. So it just provides a lot more eyes and coverage over that code than what was normally there, because it's so complex.
Cool. Awesome to hear that you were involved in the creation of that too. And I'm sure if it had your fingerprints, I'm sure it was quality production. Awesome. And so, all right, so now we've covered the audits, we've covered the bounty program, and we've covered the ongoing efforts of the red team and the community swarm. And that leads us to kind of a meaty section here, which are code updates. And we have a multi-point outline here for updates that are already identified and are going to be happening in the THORChain protocol. And there's a great recent post on THORChain's official Medium called Hardening the THORChain Protocol. And this was published earlier today. Wow. August 3rd. Huh. And in it, they list out a few things here. And we'll go through them now, but just real quick to just read off a bit of the intro here. They say there are a number of changes being made to the THORChain protocol to make it more impervious to attacks and being able to react quicker to save funds. And these changes have been made from firsthand experiences from several recent attacks where the behavior of the attacker, node operators, and community were observed. This is a key part to formulating exactly what should be done and where. One interesting piece of this introduction here that I'll point out before we dive into is that the THORChain team acknowledges that some of these changes are going to have a negative effect on the user experience in the interim. So once these changes are live, the THORChain protocol is likely to pause more frequently. Swaps will take longer to settle, and some other changes as well. But with that said, let's jump into each of these. So let's see. Tratium, do you want to read off what each of these are on a high level, and then we can kind of dig into each one?
Yeah, sure. And I would also like to point out that the kind of previous things we mentioned that were being done, like these audits and red team, are really like things that you kind of know need to be done regardless. All code really should be audited. And an active network, can only benefit from a ongoing red team. That's, it's kind of a no-brainer. But then these code changes and the specifics of what they do are really only can be kind of figured out when you actually get exploited. There's so many possibilities with what can go wrong with code or how it can be exploited. And that's like the purpose of CaseNet, as we mentioned in the last episode, is to attract hackers with real world funds. And these code changes are really the result of that. The details and implementations of how these are going to be done is really, the result of actually being hacked for real. And so the first one of these code changes is an automatic solvency checker. And this effectively allows nodes to scan wallet balances and report inconsistencies between what they expect internally and what the actual on-chain values are. And it comes in kind of two parts, a reactive and proactive solvency checker. The reactive one scans the Asgard vaults, reports on any insolvency, and if 2/3 of nodes agree that insolvency has happened, the network will just pause and it'll allow operators and developers time to figure out what's going on. Like, why is there this discrepancy? On top of that, there's a proactive mode that tries to prevent this insolvency from happening in the first place. And so outbound transactions are validated against what is expected. And ensures that the network will not go insolvent before those transactions are processed. So both of these together should do a large chunk of preventing any loss of funds. Maybe not guarantee it completely, but the solvency checkers can be a very, very major feature that will give the network additional security. And on top of that, there's going to be more granular network pause controls. And this is going to allow the network to be paused. And the new terminology now is paused because previously it was called a network halt, which is a bit of an aggressive term. And with these new features, kind of the ability to stop the network kind of more rapidly, maybe more frequently. We as users and the node operators and the developers don't want to be scared or don't want to like worry about whether or not it's the right call to halt or pause the network. If something looks fishy, go ahead and pause the network, check, the transactions, see if they're real. Better be safe than sorry, basically. And so these granular network pause controls will allow individual chains to be halted instead of the entire network. So if there's a problem with a single chain, let's say Ethereum, because that's the one we've been having problems with, only Ethereum can be paused. The rest of the chains can be up and operational, so it's less of a service interruption. This also includes the ability to pause like the THORChain ledger on its own, so freezing the network, but allow it to continue to produce blocks, and just the ability to pause outbounds, so on individual chains or across the entire network. So that would prevent outbounds from being processed, but internal stuff will still run. And another feature would be node timeouts. And this is very interesting. This is a individual, like a new command that node operators can run to halt the network themselves. So any single node can say, hey, I noticed something weird happening. Let me pause the network, and it'll be paused for 1 hour. And so the rest of the node operators, developers, team, monitoring, software, whatever, can go and see what's going on. So it is up to, it doesn't require a majority, but it also can't permanently harm the network. It's just a 1 hour pause that will allow, the interested parties to kind of diagnose what's going on. And if multiple nodes also determine that there's something fishy going on, then they can all decide to do a more long-lasting pause. And so they can actually get down to see what's going on.
That's a pause of the chain. Just to be clear, that's pausing a specific chain.
Right. Yes.
Yeah. Not the whole network.
So that's the node timeouts will be separate from the like the granular network pause.
Yes, this is basically like a mirror command given to node operators.
Okay.
So it's like a manual just command that they you send a transaction, say I want to pause the network.
It's kind of related because there's like 3 levels of pauses. So the pause trading, the pause which is just pause swaps and stuff like that. The pause chain, which does the same as the pause trading, but it stops outbounds. And then there's the pause the whole thing. Whereas the network timeouts will go to the pause chain. So that's the pause the inbounds, outbounds, and swaps. So that's where the node operators can control, will obviously request it once there's 1/3 majority of the nodes that request it. And then they can extend it if there's continuing issues. And that's all done automatically, which is really cool. And then if all the nodes agree and everything's happy, it will automatically start. So that node timeout allows the nodes to control what only, from the previous point, pause the chain and then continue the length of the pause is all controlled by the nodes instead of, by some admins.
Awesome. So that's node timeouts. And then next we have outbound throttling. Chris, do you want to give a quick overview run us through outbound throttling?
Sure. This will be quick. So really it's delaying the outbound of very large withdrawals or very large swaps. And it doesn't matter if you just do heaps of little swaps. It's going to look at the aggregate outbound, like in the total amount. So this allows nodes to detect issues. Potentially, and what we saw with those 200 ETH swaps, that would lengthen the time it takes. So you think about wait times and stuff like that. It'll be beyond the standard wait time, and that. Like I said, that allows the nodes to run these sovereignty checkers to request pauses and all that type of stuff, all those features we talked about before to happen. So just directly quoting from the post to say if this feature plus the node timeouts, so the outbound throttling plus the node timeouts with the pauses had been in place during the previous attack, then the attacker would have been delayed a full 60 minutes. And nodes could have been paused and to save the funds. Even if the attacker had broken into much smaller transactions, the maximum they could have gained in the first few minutes would have been in the vicinity of 100 to 200,000. So like I said, it doesn't matter whether you do one large transaction or you break it up into many little ones to try and hide it, it still gets detected. This amount is now less than the bounty that it could have been gained. So they might have thought about simply just reporting the bug instead of doing the hack. So again, it's like a layered approach. Do you know what I mean? You've got the solvency checks doing some automatic and passive stuff there. And then you've got these pauses with the timeouts and the outbound throttling, all designed to stop and limit the amount of funds that can be leaked during a hack.
And then it's interesting, like the layering here of like, the incentives aligning where, an exploit could total, 100 to 200,000. But, if you report it responsibly through the bug bounty program, then, you can earn up to 500,000. So they really have their incentive structures aligned, as Tratium pointed out in yesterday's episode.
Okay, I might get 100K, through a hack, or I'll go to Immunify and try and get 500. It's pretty simple.
Yeah. And next we have the node broadcast bot. And this one's pretty simple, but it's simply a tool that's going to allow nodes to broadcast messages to the THORChain dev server for if they need help or if there's any emergency messages. And so this is, Chris, do you know if this is something that's already been tested or what stage this is?
Yeah, it's been tested in the Discord server. It's pretty cool. It's a node literally broadcasting a message from their node, and it's got like the node address, their bond, and like a message. It's pretty cool. So then that can be done if they need help, like a node operator needs help, they can reach out anonymously by messaging through their node. It's pretty cool. Or if there's emergency messages and stuff like that. So therefore, it comes from a verified active node, because I think it's only for active nodes. So you can have direct communication from nodes instead of some dude saying, I'm a node operator and I see some bad stuff, whatever.
And this is good because this allows for some degree of potential, calls for support or coordination through a channel that doesn't lend itself to the risk of nodes doxing themselves and starting to collude, like, behind closed doors. And so, it's an important way for them to kind of coordinate in the event of needing help or an emergency. Next, we have live monitoring. And Chris, do you want to take this one? Are you familiar with what we're looking at here?
So there's a bot that scans the network and looks for any abnormal activity, and then it'll broadcast this, I think, in the announcements channel or something like that, in the the THORChain dev Discord server, if it spots anything that looks abnormal. So this is another proactive monitoring tool. Now, with regards to the actual functionality that this bot does and what it does and stuff like that, it's still to be defined, but it's just another tool in the toolkit to continually monitor the network for abnormalities.
I imagine this kind of is reminiscent of maybe some of the members of the Discord server saying, "Hey, like there's like a potential like kind of questionable activity here. This what is it? What was it that Tornado Cash, Ethereum was like pinging the network. There's something suspicious here." Do you know for things like the node broadcast bot or the live monitoring tools, do you know like who's responsible for, is the core team going to be developing this? Is this something that they're opening up to the community?
That I'm not sure. It's most likely a community one. But if you keep an eye on the weekly updates, you'll be able to find out who's doing it. It's currently in GitLab as an issue. So
okay.
I'd have to look into that.
Awesome. And then last but not least, whitelisting ETH smart contracts. So Tratium, do you have any context or want to give any color to this one?
I don't have too much context in this one, but I believe the idea is that, just whitelist contracts that we know are good. So that wrapped the Ethereum wrapped exploit where they created this fake router around the legitimate router would not be whitelisted. In that case, it won't work. It just only accepts transactions from whitelisted addresses. Chris might be able to shed some more light on this one.
That's pretty much it. And then I think the use of like innate, the way that second ETH exploit happened, where Bifrost looked at the original transaction instead of the one that actually got, is tightening that up. So it's not only whitelisting the actual the Ethereum router address, but whitelisting some of the functions that can be called to other functions in the router. So it's closing up some of these loopholes.
And I think one of the kind of weaknesses of THORChain before these exploits happened was that it was too trusting. And that's kind of the due to the nature of the kind of goals of the network of being a trustless, decentralized, anonymous, don't stop people from making withdrawals. You don't block, addresses from, blacklisted, Tornado Cash address or anything like that. It's a completely agnostic, neutral network.
And it's also open source and being built in public too.
Exactly.
So everything is all the warts and everything is available for anybody to see.
Yeah. And so the idea of allowing any contract to interact with THORChain was kind of almost by design, let's let anyone work with the network. That's the whole point. But now, after these exploits, the idea of tightening it down a bit, whitelisting things that are, possible exploit points is an important change to make.
The THORChain team wraps up this Medium post, hardening the THORChain protocol with this kind of really strong closing statement here that, nothing like THORChain exists today. And as a result, the community and the team are learning on the fly, thinking on their feet. Some damage has been incurred, but the experiences are being used to fortify the foundations. And this means that in the short term, there will be some negative impacts on the user experience on the network, but THORChain must be able to survive the following decades. It can't willfully, quote unquote, sign away the entire TVL and its vaults within a few seconds from an attack. So a happy medium needs to be struck. Over time, these measures can be dialed back, but it's currently a battlefield and THORChain is bringing its best armor until the battle is won. I can say, I'm pretty sure we can speak on behalf of the whole community. We're all for that. Let's move forward slowly and cautiously, because on the other end here is a prize that is worth being patient and doing extremely patiently and diligently. So that wraps up the active security monitoring and the code updates. The last section that we have here is selecting network insurance. So Tratium, do you want to give a quick overview of what role insurance can play in something like a THORChain, and then we can talk about THORChain's approach?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's, DeFi insurance is kind of this up and coming, new low level service that's being offered from the likes of Nexus Mutual, Tidal, and a handful of others. And effectively, you take out insurance for a specific protocol, say Uniswap, SushiSwap, THORChain. You pay a percentage of the value you want to have protected, say 5%. So if you want to protect 5% of $1,000, you pay that premium. And for that window that you have that insurance taken out, if the network is hacked, if you lose funds, you can file a claim within that with your insurance provider, just like you would in the real world. And then through their governance, they determine if your claim is legitimate. If so, they pay it out and you're made whole. And so THORChain wants to build that into the protocol. And I can't, there might be another example of a DeFi protocol doing this. I can't think of any. For the most part, it's up to the users to decide if they want to. Perhaps Yearn has a checkbox where you can check that if you want to be insured, and that goes through to an insurance provider. But yeah, THORChain is the first one where I've seen these proposals for protocol level insurance, where all users, swappers, LPs, nodes would be insured. And I believe the latest news as of maybe this morning is a proposal by Tidal to protect, I believe, 5 to 10% of the TVL at a rate of 5% for premiums. And this might be done in combination with other providers to provide even more than that 5 to 10%. But at the end of the day, unless a hack takes out everything, that 5 to 10% will probably cover, a single exploit losses. In that case, it would be a pretty cut and dry way of filing claims, on the protocol's behalf. They would do this all for you, making users whole, and that wouldn't come from the treasury. And that protects the kind of long-term viability of the treasury, long-term viability of the protocol, protects it from catastrophic hacks. And it's a great initiative, and it's just that extra level of protection that in addition to all these software merge requests that are being made to the solvency checkers and such, the audits, the monitoring, the red team, just having insurance is like the best insurance. And I personally have Nexus Mutual taken out on my THORChain LP position, but I have not needed it because the treasury has made us all whole, and now I won't renew it because when the network goes live, it'll have this built in.
Oh, interesting that you've insured your IL positions with Nexus Mutual. What does that this is just an aside, but what does that process look like? What's the user experience look like if you're just an LP as opposed to a protocol and you want to insure an LP position with Nexus Mutual?
Yeah, so first with Nexus Mutual in particular, this is the only one I have experience with. You do have to KYC, so you upload an ID. They know who you are because they are a legal entity in the UK, I believe. You have to pay a membership fee. Again, there's UK laws or wherever they're incorporated that if you want to be part of a legal mutual, a legal entity that allows you to take part in this kind of collective insurance program, you pay a membership fee and you're part of that legally. But you take out an insurance claim, through their UI. You get NXM, their token. And you select how much you want to insure. So like $1,000, $10,000, $100,000. There is a maximum that is available to be covered per protocol. And this is probably why Tidal is doing 5 to 10% right now with their proposals, because they may not have the capital to cover more than that. And so I think with Nexus Mutual, they have about 25 million total available coverage for THORChain. And I think only a small percentage of that is actually being used right now by people like myself and others who have taken out insurance. And so you just select, how much you want to have protected, the length of time, 30, 60, 90 days, a year, and whether or not you want to pay in Ethereum or DAI. And then you submit your transaction, you're covered. And if you ever need to file a claim, you go back to their DApp, file a claim, upload some verification that the address that is affected is owned by you, when the event happened, all this stuff. And then it goes back to their governance system, and the community votes on whether or not to process your claim and make you whole.
Awesome. And so Nexus Mutual can insure on the individual level. And then there's talks about doing it on the protocol level with THORChain. And then we're also in talks with Harbor and Tidal, as Chris mentioned. The time of events here, the timeline of events as outlined in the THORChain timeline, network timeline notion, has us progressing with selecting network insurance in 3 stages. So the first is going to be discussions with insurance providers doing a feasibility study. Second is, and that's going on now through mid-August. And then through the end of August, they will solicit community feedback and put these options out to the community, and then let the feedback vote. And then last but not least, agreeing on an option and set up the coverage. And so that'll be from like early September onward. And so, Chris, did you have anything else to add around the network insurance?
No, it's good to see. Give people a bit more confidence. I think, with luck, it's not going to be needed with all the changes coming out. But it's good to know that it is there. I think people will sleep a bit better, particularly some of the community core devs, knowing it's there.
And it will look great as a headline, look great on the website, fully insured, from impermanent loss, fully insured through actual protocol level insurance. It's going to be a really good way from a public relations perspective to gain confidence back in the network. It's a really good, badge of honor to have that kind of protocol level insurance as part of your value prop.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's basically what separates like real banks from a lot of like DeFi.
Yes, absolutely.
DeFi lending pools is like people look at the FDIC insurance. And then, we also can keep in mind this doesn't just protect liquidity providers, but also, node operators who have hundreds of millions of dollars of assets bonded at any given point in time, or more to come. And then swappers, exchangers that are coming to the network, or arbitragers that are coming to the network. The whole system will be insured. And that will be, like you said, just really strengthening. And all of this adds up to really just like it's faith inspiring, it's confidence inspiring. And this is like the term anti-fragile gets thrown around a lot these days. It's super, popularized, but it really is in essence like a great example of anti-fragility here, where some things break down in chaos. These things are fragile. Some things are robust. They can stand up to chaos, but some things actually evolve and grow stronger as a result of chaos. And that's things like evolution, and like, organisms, like living organisms that can, and like, what are they, like immune systems, they get stronger when they're tested. And we can actually see that coming together here as a result of all of these initiatives. So yeah, that wraps up this 5-prong recovery plan. Auditing, a bounty program, ongoing efforts through the red team and the community swarm, changes to the protocol, including active security monitoring, pausing, etc., and then implementing protocol level insurance. And with that takes us into the next section here. So as we get back online, there are some things to keep in mind that need to be thought through, some consequences of the recent exploits and attacks that need to be understood and answers developed in order to move forward in a healthy way. So Chris, do you want to give an overview of some of these consequences that need to be understood and worked on before moving forward, or as we move forward?
Sure. So I just put that in there thinking that, there's a lot of questions around there, like, what about my uncompleted swaps? Do I get made wholes in LP, and what happens about the node operators, and how's the thing going to restart, and all these things. So there's a lot of things to consider, I think, for the core team, as well as doing all these things in the background. So they're things that need to just be worked through and to be understood about the consequences of a halt, and the things you don't really think about, like impairment loss protection time. So the 100 days obviously being paused, and, what happens if you start the chain, just does that continue? Does it not continue? So I think there's a lot to work through, and that's going to keep the core team quite busy. Just, think about how do we enumerate the community of the people involved in THORChain during the halt, the node operators, the active nodes, the standby nodes, liquidity providers. How do we make them whole again? How do we restore the network or the protocol and the pools back to the right balance? All these type of things, and it was, as well as the restart process, the deployment of all the patches and the upgrades, the order they need to get to be in to ensure that everything runs smoothly. It's a massive process to go from where we are now, implement all these changes, to do a successful staged restart and keep everyone happy as much as they can. So I think it's just a lot to be thought about. And, there's probably some difficult decisions that's not going to make everyone happy. But, just I think there's a lot of things to be worked out. And it's good to see that there's probably enough time for that to happen as well.
Awesome. And these initiatives that are taking place as we harden the system, strengthen the system, audit the system, test it, and evolve it. These exercises, these answers that we have to develop for these questions will all eventually lead way to THORChain coming back online. And THORChain is going to come online in a kind of measured, layered way. And let's see, Tratium, do you want to give an overview of how that happens, the different steps involved?
So the first stage of the chain restart, which is being actively discussed, is when to restart just the THORChain blockchain. Just get nodes unhalted, but stop outbound transactions, stop all sorts of processing. Just allow the blocks to be produced. That is kind of the very bottom layer of the system. And that kind of needs to be done relatively soon so that nodes can continue to patch themselves and accept updates so that liquidity providers and node operators can get their rewards and so that the network can actually be running. But don't process external chain transactions because that's the weak link there. If there are still vulnerabilities that exist, that's how attackers get them processed out. So that would not be enabled. But then over time, chains will be restarted one by one. So I think the timeline is roughly that the Binance chain would be re-enabled sometime this month in August, after audits are complete for that specific chain. And then after that, maybe in September, UTXO chains like Bitcoin, Bitcoin Cash, Litecoin would be enabled. And then finally, the ETH chain would be restarted and re-enabled after, I'm sure a heavy set of audits are complete on it. And that would maybe be around October. And then there's still a big old question mark TBA regarding what to do regarding the ERC20s. Those would not necessarily be restarted alongside Ethereum unless the audits are wildly successful and determine that there's no risks at all. But there's probably going to be a pretty heavy discussion around whether or not to re-enable ERC20s. There is a chance that they'll not be re-enabled for now, and that we'll just restart with the main chains and not ERC20s, and for the purpose of additional security and limiting that attack surface. But maybe in combination with all of the above protections and audits, the kind of THORSec team will determine that it's safe to restart ERC20s. So that's a big old TBD, and we'll see what happens. And that'll probably be late October or so.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I think, it would be just, there's a lot of trade-offs to think through when thinking about, for example, like ERC20s going back online. But for me, it's the biggest pain point is not going from ERC20s to other chains, as long as you can get to ETH, and so you can go from ERC20s to ETH using any number of, Ethereum dexes. And then like for me, the biggest pain point right now that I actually have like day to day is getting from, for example, like BUSD or BNB Rune to USDC or Ethereum or Bitcoin. But traveling within those chains, there's already other dexes that can handle that. It would be nice to have that all under one roof, but I can, I can wait for that. Part of this is actually also current events. And so Chris, this is something you mentioned before we hopped on. Do you want to give a quick recap of the debate that's happening today as to whether or not to restart?
Yeah, so there's been a suggestion from the core team to restart the THORChain blockchain, the replicated state machine, and that way, and disable Bifrost. So essentially that's the THORChain blockchain just running by itself, basically no features. So if you think about single chain ChaosNet, it'll be like that without BEP2 assets. So there's just like nothing happening. But that enables block rewards to be done. It starts the clock on impermanent loss protection, 100 days, because at the moment that clock's paused because the chain's paused. It enables updates to go through, like code updates to go through and to test. It enables them, all those things like the pause stuff, the sovereignty checks and all that can actually get done and tested out before we connect external chains. And then the most important thing is if you see my security videos, that THORChain uses TSS or threshold signature scheme vaults, which is the Asgard vault, and that has a certain node set. It's the active nodes that are in the key generation process. And then you need 2/3 of those nodes that were in the key generation process in order to sign a transaction for funds to move out of the Asgard. So the real risk here is if node operators say, you know what, I'm out, I'm going to leave and just destroy my node, or something happens to their node, they actually can't leave while the network's paused. Then you lose that 2/3, then all the funds in Asgard would be stuck because no one has the primary key. It's like a 2/3 collective of the original signing party is required in order to move funds out of that vault. So then that would enable the churn. By restarting, also enables the churn, enables node operators to churn out, to leave, to unbond, to rebond, to restart, and stuff like that, as well as do changes and stuff to the cluster launcher and node launchers. So all these things that these benefits and kind of consequences for starting the chain would be beneficial. It's just getting at the moment a consensus from the community to do that, which I think a lot of people are perhaps a bit scared to do that, even though I think, in my opinion, the risk is quite low because it's literally the only thing at risk is the THORChain blockchain, and anything on the THORChain blockchain being, like native Rune. That's it. So that's what's happening now.
Yeah, when you walk through kind of like the case for like why for the health of the network and to mitigate the potential risk of like stale, like nodes going stale and going offline. It almost occurs to me that like THORChain is kind of like a shark. It just needs it can't sit still for too long. Otherwise, all these assets that are pulled inside are at risk or become at risk. And so there needs to be some forward progress here, and nodes need to be able to churn in and out to keep the network alive and healthy.
Yeah, it has to swim even when it's sleeping. Yeah.
There you go. A fitting analogy. And so, Yeah, I think, with all of these things, again, said it before, and it's pretty incredible, really, the response from the community. I mean, we talked a lot about the technical changes that are evolving here, some of the process changes, some of the ways that the team and ecosystem partners and the community are rallying around this. And we can also take a moment to reflect on like what this sentiment, like just like, the THORChain community it's one of the first things that people notice when they look at THORChain, if they really look under the hood. And that is that THORChain is one of those projects that just has this really uniquely strong community. And it lives in Twitter, it lives in Discord, it lives on some Telegram chats. And it really, and it's this kind of beautiful breathing organism. And we're all a part of it. And when, the exploits happened in July, amidst the backdrop of a already sideways or down market, the community was kind of stung. And it's incredible to see how quickly the community has galvanized and strengthened as a result of this extremely transparent and professional response. And then these extremely pragmatic initiatives that have evolved around it. Do you guys, Tratium or Chris, do you guys want to talk about like what you've seen in the community, either on Twitter and Discords, in the wake of the attack?
Yeah. I mean, even right now, as we're speaking, there's this discussion, as we mentioned, of whether or not to restart the THORChain blockchain. And, there was a simple Discord sentiment check, by the developers saying, hey, like, should we enable it real quick? And get, back up and running, let node rewards, start getting to send out again, so we can push out more updates and everything. And the overwhelming response from the community was like, wait, no. Like, let's wait to see what more developers say. Let's see what the red team says. And even though a lot of people have their funds stuck in THORChain right now, liquidity providers, node operators, there is millions of dollars in user funds in THORChain right now that is kind of just halted along with the network. And despite that, most of the community is not concerned about that. They're concerned about the network itself. They're like, hey, let's make sure it's safe. Let's make sure that everything is good to go before we make a decision on this. And that is just an incredible response. People are not necessarily like desperate to get out of the network, desperate to move their money elsewhere. They overwhelmingly want the network to succeed and want these initiatives to be put in place, THORSec, et cetera, to be put in place before anything dangerous can happen. Because as we've mentioned before, like THORChain is trying to compete with like centralized exchanges. It's huge. It's what it's trying to accomplish is not something that can just easily be replaced. And to see the community acknowledging that and understanding the ramifications of a potential failure of THORChain is really cool to see that they understand how big of a deal this network is and how important it is to do things right. And right now we've been presented with a really good opportunity to take a step back, make sure we have all of these different new processes in place to ensure that the network does succeed. And this it's just really, really cool to see just this overwhelming response from the community. And it's very encouraging. And it's the network has the community has only grown in wake of these attacks, which is amazing.
Chris, how about you? What have you been seeing from your vantage point in the community, in the ecosystem, in the chats on Twitter?
I similar type of sentiment. Everybody, come along and say THORChain needs to happen. It's got such a long future with where it's going to go, and it's one of those things where maybe we just need to take some time to get it right. I think everybody agrees with that. Everybody seems to have got on board with the timeline, even though it's quite a long timeline. I think it's very positive. Personally, I think it's quite good that this has happened. Could you imagine if we just kept on, rushing and all this type of stuff didn't happen? It's been really good. to see this, it's been really good for everybody just to stop and then focus on the hardening and probably doing all these little things that didn't get round to before and just get them done and implement them whilst we've got this time. So you think about what THORChain's trying to do. Yeah, trying to get, challenge the, with THORFi on top, challenge the centralized exchanges, challenge those centralized, like the BlockFi and the Celsius and stuff like that, as well as some of the DeFi components when you're going to have like all of the lending and then indexing and all that type of stuff on top with THORFi. It's really going to challenge like wrapped assets and all that type of stuff. And that's just THORChain by itself. When you complement that with IBC, with like Terra and Sift Chain and all this type of stuff, it's just it's bonkers what's going to happen. And I think it's really going to be a big paradigm shift within DeFi. We already see that just with wallets, because at the moment, all the wallets are single chain wallets. What chain do you want on your wallet if you get a ledger? Whereas THORChain, I need at least 5 chains on my wallet. Like that's what I need. I don't need a single chain. I need a multi-chain wallet, and that should be the norm. Why can't I have a cold wallet option for multi-chain? Like I understand, okay, cold wallet for Bitcoin, but I want something that I can hold for THORChain and my assets without having to individually do all this stuff. So I think that DeFi's grown or crypto's grown in a certain way, and THORChain's going to take it in a different direction and having a look at what else is around. THORChain's the leader, but there are other people trying to do the same thing. And THORChain's, perhaps 5 years from now, it's going to be one of quite a few of its ilk. So I think everyone agrees that it's tough. They're paving the way. They're the first ones to do it. It's not ideal. It is chaos then. It's perhaps a little frustrating, but in the long term, we all agree that it needs to be done. It must succeed at kind of whatever the cost is.
And I'd like to echo that sentiment that Chris just said about, it's a huge shift for DeFi. And it's almost like a chicken and egg problem. Like to do cross-chain DeFi, like you said, the wallets didn't exist for it. Why didn't the wallets exist for it? Well, maybe because the cross-chain DEXs didn't exist yet. And so, THORChain, bootstrapped, XDeFi wallet to make both parts of that exist. And now that with THORChain and with future DeFi kind of composabilities initiatives and changes, it will really change the landscape and kind of unlock this new world and make cross-chain DeFi like the new normal. And that's going to be kind of a surprise, I think, for a lot of people who are used to just being on Ethereum or on Binance Smart Chain or on any of these other individual chains, to be able to do things across multiple. It's going to be very interesting to see over the next year how THORChain changes the landscape of DeFi.
I couldn't agree more, and the hair on the back of my neck is standing up. You just gave me goosebumps, Tratium. I'm shivering over here. But to your point, and I was listening to a Bankless podcast earlier today, and I love that show, and I love the work that they do. But they're such Ethereum maximalists to where they refuse to acknowledge any other external DeFi ecosystems, to where they had this refrain. They were talking about their bed index. It's Bitcoin, 1/3 Bitcoin, 1/3 Ethereum, 1/3 Ethereum DeFi. And they're like, that's it. That covers literally everything. And I'm just sitting there being like, oh man, like there's so much coming, and it's not vaporware. It's real, like cross-chain swaps and native yield on UTXO assets and synthetics that are built on top of that liquidity, and algorithmic stablecoins built on Terra, or built on Terra, and so much more that's enabled outside of the world of Ethereum DeFi and THORChain and XDeFi that you mentioned. They do bring it all together in just this incredible way, and the community kind of sees that there's not going to be a straight line of success. It's hard, and that is exactly why it hasn't been done yet. And that also therein lies its moat, like to think that any of the other potential competitors in this cross-chain liquidity race aren't going to be faced with the same degrees of complexity that THORChain is, for some reason, is, it's not realistic. And And through that complexity is where you have the surface area for some of these attacks and hacks. So like these attacks in a way are indicative of like how valuable this problem will be once it's solved, because it is that hard. Something that we haven't talked about on this show, and we don't really talk that much about on this podcast, but I think it is a strong barometer of sentiment, is also price action. And this isn't financial advice, but you can track pretty easily like how sentiment has galvanized around THORChain just in the price action of Rune on exchanges over the last 3-4 days, where in the wake of the exploits, Rune bottomed out around somewhere around like 350, maybe a little under, a little over, give or take. And in the last 24 hours, last like 3 days, we saw Rune really just pump beyond, like past $4, $5, $6, and even $7, peaking most recently, I think above $7 at about $7.30 if I'm looking at CoinGecko now. And that's incredible. Like just a 100% pump, just in the wake of the response here. And I think that's as good an indicator as anything that like this community is here for it and here for the challenge and for the long run. So it's just a great way to start off August, with just this ton of positive momentum and energy and confidence that for a project that we just see is changing the game. So yeah, I'm riled up, boys.
So I'm very excited.
I just want to add to that. So when BEPSwap launched, the lead up to BEPSwap and stuff like that, there was a lot of, hype and anticipation. If you were, there, I guess if you weren't, you didn't have it. And then when multi-chain launched, there was a lot of, hype and anticipation. There was a bit of memeing around that as well, and then when that launched, it was a whole big event. Obviously there's, the price does reflect this as well. You can see this. So, I don't know what's going to happen on the price, not comment on that, but I know that when multi-chain relaunches, when all this happens in September, October, or whatever, pick a date, I think there's going to be all this memeing and hype and excitement that's really going to drive a lot of energy into the restart of the chain when trading can happen. And, who knows what's going to happen, because, there's going to be a lot of price changes. There's going to be a lot of arbing. There's going to be a lot of liquidity movements. Either people are going to dive in or they're going to pull out. Like, who knows what's going to happen? It's going to be absolute chaos on the restart. It's like restarting a Formula One race. It's going to be nuts.
Yeah.
Who knows?
Yeah.
So it's looking forward to it.
Yeah, it's going to be very, very exciting. And I also think to add on to what we were saying, like I think THORChain is it's almost attacked most by maxis because it's a threat. Because maxis, they want their chain be the one chain to rule them all. So if there's another chain that exists, they don't like it. And if there is a protocol that allows multiple chains to exist in harmony and be able to easily move between them, that is also a threat. They like their moats. They like their walled gardens. And so THORChain is absolutely hit hardest and critiqued hardest by Bitcoin maxis and Ethereum maxis. But at the end of the day, all users, benefit from cross-chain DeFi. And I think THORChain is going to be one of those things where, on multi-chain restart, on when KSNet is back online, and again when mainnet is back online, everyone who knows THORChain is going to be very excited, back up and using it. A lot of integrations will happen, and a lot of people will end up using THORChain that didn't expect to. And I think even longer term, all these people who kind of don't know about THORChain or were hating on it, I think it's one of those things where almost everyone inevitably will be using it as it becomes kind of like this, webbing of all of crypto. If it's the only game in town for cross-chain DeFi, and if a service offers the ability to swap, if SushiSwap adds the ability to switch between Bitcoin and Ethereum, there's a good chance they'll be using THORChain on the back end. It's one of those things where you may not know the name THORChain, but you'll be using it.
I'm really interested to see this. What's this going to do to wrapped assets? Do you like the wrapped Bitcoin?
Yes.
When
that's going to be very interesting.
If you think of wrapped Bitcoin and stuff like that as a workaround in order to move value from Bitcoin chain to Ethereum chain, when you don't need to do that anymore, what's going to happen? That's what I find interesting. Are people going to, what's going to happen? It's really interesting.
That's huge. And it's even huger for just the average retail user. If I tried to explain to my dad how to, let's say he only wants to be exposed to Bitcoin because he's an old boomer. And he wants to, invest it into something like Yearn or whatever. How am I going to explain to him how to wrap it? All these, DeFi protocols that have these multiple levels of wrapping and staking, getting LP tokens and all that. It's all so complicated to people who are not crypto native. Whereas THORChain, there's already, DEXs that are being, kind of planned like Swipe that are going to have like a very simple like Coinbase type of interface where you can just connect your wallet, deposit native Bitcoin, get 20% on it. And like, that's amazing to someone who doesn't really understand DeFi, doesn't really understand the concept wrapped peg tokens. And it's just going to, the user base that, it's the accessibility is going to expand the user base just exponentially. It's really going to onboard potentially many people onto DeFi who wouldn't normally touch it because of its current complexity.
And that's where synths come in. You're like, Dad, just put it into this synth vault. It's like a high interest account.
Exactly.
Right? You just do that. It's easy. Buy Bitcoin, put it there.
It's called a savings account. Yeah, exactly.
I can't wait. Even as a crypto power user, there are accounts that I have that, like my company corporate checking account, and we have like these long-term cash accounts that we like withholding accounts for like our taxes. And right now they're sitting in a like a 0.002% APY like long-term savings account. And I'm just thinking, if it were, I don't really want to be troubled to bridge that from fiat into USDC, and then from USDC, I'd love for this to end up in something like, Terra, and staked in Anchor, and then be earning like 20% on UST, on this money that's just sitting there dormant. And right now that's still just too much friction for me to want to go through that trouble with my, with this particular account. And, those, that friction and those bridges are going to come down over time. And it'll be easier and easier to go from from fiat into DeFi protocols with higher yield, and higher interest, and people like Broker and Sweep that you mentioned, and others are leading that charge with protocols like THORChain, synthetic assets, and protocols like Terra and Ethereum DeFi as well. Just the future is bright for DeFi. We're all looking forward to it.
Yeah, DeFi, future of finance.
Yes, sir. And we'll be here to educate and capture on all of it. I think between GrassRoots Crypto and RUNEBase, I think Chris, I said it before, but I love the idea. I love that we get to collaborate on something here. And I'm looking forward to more collaborations in the future. I think we got a lot of good stuff we can do together.
Yeah, it's going to be good.
Awesome. Well, that Tratium, Chris, any closing thoughts? Anything you guys want to leave the audience with?
I'm just so excited that to be able to follow up yesterday's episode with something that in such a short amount of time, the community, the developers, institutional investors have rallied together to create an incredibly comprehensive plan to get things back up and running in a safe and secure way that protects all the users. And it's just like, it's unheard of in crypto. A chain gets hacked, a network gets hacked, a protocol gets hacked, whatever. They 9 times out of 10, they disappear, they crumble. The community evaporates overnight. The money evaporates. The developers, go on a yacht trip somewhere out. And with THORChain, that was not the response. The response was just overwhelming support from all corners of the community. And that is really more bullish than any price action short term. Like, it's just incredible to see, this multifaceted approach to audits, insurance, code updates, and it's just such a promising thing to see. And it just makes me so excited. And the next couple of months are going to be very interesting to see all these initiatives that have been put together start rolling out, culminating in the restart of ChaosNet. It's an exciting time to take part in the community. And while the network is down, good time to build, good time to start learning your way around THORChain, if you want to learn how to contribute, to any of these projects or any of these community tools, it's a perfect time to do it.
Love it. Well said. Tratium, Chris, thanks for joining me. If anybody wants to follow up with you guys, twitter.com/Tratium, Tratium, or twitter.com/GrassRootsIO, or search for GrassRoots Crypto on YouTube. Guys, thanks for joining me, and look forward to talking with you guys again soon.